Hi, my name is Ginger Nickerson, and I am the Forest Pest Education Coordinator for the Vermont Urban and Community Forestry Program, a collaboration between the Vermont Department of Forests, Parks, and Recreation and UVM Extension. Today, we're going to be going over the basics of emerald ash borer, including identification, biology, signs and symptoms, and what you can do to help limit the spread of this invasive species. First, let's review what we mean by invasive species so that we are all on the same page with terminology. In order to be an invasive species, an organism has to meet two requirements. First, it has to not be from a local ecosystem, and second, it must cause some kind of harm to the economy, environment, or human health. In the case of the emerald ash borer, it comes from Asia, so it's not native to North America, and it causes harm to our ash trees. There are many species of plants and animals in the U.S. that are not native, but are not considered invasive because they do not cause significant harm. So what does the emerald ash borer look like? The adult beetle is only about half an inch long, about the size of a cooked grain of rice. It has a distinctive bullet-shaped body, flattened head, and a metallic green color. As you can see here, the insect is very tiny. Its small size has played a role in why it has been so hard to detect when it initially enters a new region. Let's take a look at the story of the emerald ash borer, or EAB for short, and learn how we got to where we are today. The emerald ash borer is native to East Asia. Within its native range, this insect co-evolved with local ash trees, which developed tolerance to the beetle, and with local predators, which control the beetle's population levels within its native range. How did the emerald ash borer come to the United States? We think that the EAB, like many other tree pests, was brought to this country in solid woodpacking material. Once in the U.S., it's been rapidly dispersed by people transporting wood material, especially by transporting firewood. One of the most important things we can do to reduce the spread of invasive species is to stop moving firewood around. What we suggest is buying firewood as close as possible to the location where you will be burning it, rather than taking it with you from your home, for example, to your campsite in a different location and risk transporting invasive pests. Emerald ash borer was first discovered in Detroit, Michigan in 2002. Since then, it has spread to over 35 states and 5 Canadian provinces. In this image, each red dot represents a county that has found EAB. The blue line represents what was once the legal quarantine area around these infested states. The USDA made the decision to remove the quarantine in January 2021 in favor of focusing on biocontrol methods. You can see how widely spread EAB is on this map. On its own, the insect is only able to fly an average of 1 to 2 miles a year, but because of human movement of wood products such as firewood, the beetle has been able to spread to places like Colorado that it might not otherwise have traveled to on its own. Emerald ash borer was confirmed in northern Orange County, Vermont in February 2018. This was the first emerald ash borer infestation discovered in Vermont. Since 2018, we've been confirming numerous new infestations each year. You can find the most up-to-date map of confirmed infestations in Vermont by going to vtinvasives.org and going to the section on emerald ash borer. This map is updated every time a new infestation of EAB is confirmed. You can also sign up on this page for the EAB Update Listserv to be notified every time there is a new infestation confirmed in the state. EAB feeds on all species of ash trees in the U.S. In Vermont, we have 3 different species of native ash: white, green, and black, along with ornamental ash trees. The emerald ash borer will also feed on white fringe tree. While white fringe tree is not in the same genus as ash, it is within the same family, Oleaceae, which is the olive family. While white fringe tree is not native to Vermont, it is planted here as an ornamental in yards and parks. The economic impact of EAB has been greater than that of any other invasive forest pest in North America. To date, over $10.7 billion have been spent on the treatment, removal, and replacement of ash trees because of this invasive insect. EAB can kill ash in a relatively short amount of time. Healthy ash trees will die within 1 to 5 years of showing their first sign or symptom of being infested. In these photos, you see a streetscape in Ohio over the course of 3 years. In the photo on the left are healthy-looking ash trees, and in the photo on the right, just 3 years later, all of those same ash trees have been killed by the emerald ash borer. The irony of this is that in the mid-1900s, Dutch elm disease killed almost all of the American elm trees that were planted as street trees in the U.S. After the elms died, communities often planted ash trees in their place, since ash can tolerate harsh urban conditions, grow quickly, and provide good shade. In some cities, ash trees make up to 40 or 50% of their urban canopy. So unfortunately, many communities in the U.S. will experience another deforestation event similar to the Dutch elm disease disaster. Hopefully this time around we'll learn from our mistakes and we'll replant a diversity of tree species in our communities so that they won't be as vulnerable to disease and insect invasions in the future. Not only does the emerald ash borer kill ash trees relatively rapidly, but it is also thorough. In other parts of the country, EAB has been found to kill 99.9% of the ash trees. It usually kills close to 100% of black ash and green ash. A very small percentage of white ash seem to have some tolerance of EAB. It's not clear yet if this is true resistance or if they are just able to tolerate the pest longer than other individuals. These trees are called lingering ash. In Vermont, ash trees are found throughout the state and are considered an early successional species, which grow well in disturbed areas. Landscape-wide, 5 to 7% of the trees in Vermont are ash. However, in some regions, ash can compose 20 to 70% of a forest community. Ash also play an important ecological role in the landscape. White ash, or Fraxinus americana, is a significant component of our upland northern hardwood forest, supporting many critical ecosystem functions. Black ash, or Fraxinus nigra, also called brown ash, is spiritually and culturally significant for Eastern indigenous peoples and is the primary material used for traditional basket making. Black ash grows in mineral-rich seepages and swamps, stabilizes the water table, and buffers the impacts of floods. Green ash, or Fraxinus pennsylvanica, also grows well in floodplain forests and helps to keep our rivers cool and mitigate floods. Leaves from all three species produce nutrient-dense litter, providing an important food source for many forest invertebrates and microorganisms. 286 species of insects and spiders depend on North American ash trees for food and shelter, and at least 44 species of arthropods feed exclusively on ash trees. Fortunately, it is possible to protect individual ash trees from predation by EAB by treating them with an insecticide. Communities or individuals may decide to treat healthy, high-value ash trees to preserve those trees and the benefits that they provide over time. The insecticide treatments need to be continued every 2 to 3 years for as long as you want to keep the tree alive. Municipalities will need to make decisions about how they want to manage their ash trees in the face of EAB. When ash trees die, they can fail in unpredictable ways and split high up on the trunk. Failure of dead ash trees will increase during storms. Because municipalities are legally required to ensure public safety within the public right-of-way and on public land, at a minimum, municipalities and towns will need to respond to ash trees that become public safety hazards. Emerald ash borer will cause direct expenses as communities respond to the impacts of the pest by treating or by removing and replacing their ash trees. These costs will largely be borne by homeowners and municipal governments. In addition to the economic cost, there will also be the cost of the loss of environmental services provided by ash trees, such as habitat for other organisms, soil stabilization, and flood mitigation. Before we get any further, let's take a moment and learn how to identify ash trees. Ash trees have opposite branching. Their twigs appear thick compared to other opposite branching tree species, such as maples. You can also identify ash trees by their leaves. Ash trees have compound or pinnate feather-like leaves with 5 to 11 leaflets. Their fruit are called samaras, and unlike maple tree samaras, they are shaped like oars or paddles. You can also often see the pom-pom-like buds of male ash trees silhouetted against the sky in the springtime. The bark of white and green ash trees has distinctive, deep, diamond-shaped grooves. Now we'll cover the life cycle of emerald ash borer. EAB goes through complete metamorphosis and has one generation per year. The adults emerge from the tree in May or June. The adult beetle then feeds on leaves in the tree's canopy between June and August. During this time, the female beetle lays her eggs on the bark of the trunk and branches. The eggs hatch in 7 to 10 days, and the larvae burrow into the tree and tunnel under the inner bark, creating extensive S-shaped galleries or tunnels. The larvae then overwinter as pre-pupae. Pupation begins in late April or May, and then the adults emerge in late May or early June, starting the cycle all over again. So you'll see that the emerald ash borer spends most of its life cycle inside the tree as a larvae. The larvae are small, growing up to an inch long, and can be distinguished by their bell-shaped body segments. They live just under the bark of the tree, feeding primarily on the phloem and cambium layers, which transport water and nutrients between the roots and leaves of the tree. It's this cutting off of the nutrients that eventually kills the tree. Now we'll look at the signs and symptoms of EAB. One of the most obvious and distinctive signs are the S-shaped galleries that the larvae make under the outer bark of the ash tree. There are many wood-boring insects that make galleries, but you know you have EAB if the galleries are S-shaped and are on an ash tree. However, usually by the time you're able to see the S-shaped galleries, the ash is already dead. A thinning canopy is another symptom. As EAB populations within an individual tree increase, the canopy will exhibit signs of stress. The upper branches tend to die back first. This can happen over a very short period of time, so a sudden change from a live crown to significant dieback could indicate an EAB infestation in the tree. However, many factors can stress an ash tree and cause canopy thinning. Epicormic branches or side sprouts are essentially a sign of a stressed tree that is trying to put out as much green as possible so that it can feed and sustain itself. As the canopy declines, you will see epicormic branching off the trunk of the tree. This can be a sign of EAB, but not necessarily so. The presence of EAB larvae tunneling under the bark of the host tree causes a wound response by the tree. Sometimes this results in bark splitting at or near the wound site and can reveal the S-shaped galleries underneath. The best indicator of whether an ash tree is infested with EAB is intense woodpecker activity. As woodpeckers go after the larvae under the bark, the hammering of their beaks and the scraping of their feet flakes off the outer bark and creates a blonde appearance to the bark that can be visible from the ground. Finally, the D-shaped exit holes through which the adults exit can also be characteristic of EAB. These exit holes are very small, however, so they are very hard to spot. Because the insect spends most of its life inside the tree and its exit holes are so small, it can be very hard to detect an EAB infestation until it's fairly well established. Detroit did not notice its infestation until it had been there for about 10 years. So an ash tree might not exhibit signs for the first 3 to 5 years after the initial infestation. This image shows how the visible symptoms of infestation often do not start to show until the larvae underneath the bark have grown to large populations. As this slide shows, there are a number of native insects in Vermont that are easily confused with the emerald ash borer. One of the most commonly confused species is the six-spotted tiger beetle on the bottom right of this picture. This is a beetle you're likely to see on the ground in your garden in the beginning of the summer. Remember, though, that the adult beetle of EAB spends most of its time in the canopy of the tree, so it's unlikely but not impossible that you will see the adult beetle. What's more likely is that you'll see a stressed ash tree, and then you might have to do some detective work to determine if the symptoms are due to EAB or not. If you think you've seen a tree that is infested with emerald ash borer, please take photos of it and report it on vtinvasives.org. vtinvasives.org is the go-to place for information on all invasive species in Vermont. Resources for homeowners and forest owners on emerald ash borer can also be found at vtinvasives.org. Finally, we also have many resources to help community groups and municipalities manage their ash trees in the face of EAB. All of these can be found at vtcommunityforestry.org.